Hey, beautiful souls. Zachy here, coming at you with another deep dive into the fascinating world of mental health. I'm so excited you've joined me today as we explore one of the most misunderstood aspects of human psychology, the many different faces of depression. If you ever thought depression was just about feeling sad or crying all the time, this video might completely transform your understanding of what millions of people around the world are actually experiencing. When someone says, "I'm struggling with depression," most people conjure up images of someone buried under blankets, unable to get out of bed, perhaps with tears streaming down their face. And yes, that can absolutely be part of the experience for many. But depression is so much more complex, so much more nuanced, and frankly, so much more interesting from a psychological perspective than most people realize. Today, we're peeling back the layers on several types of depression that often fly under the radar. The kind that ebbs and flows with the seasons, the type that can hit new parents during what's supposed to be the happiest time of their lives, and other variations that might make you rethink everything you thought you knew about this common but complicated condition. Before we jump in, though, I want to emphasize something incredibly important. This video isn't a diagnostic tool. If anything I discussed today resonates with your personal experience, please consider it an invitation to have a conversation with a healthcare professional who can provide personalized guidance. My goal here is to expand awareness, crush stigma into dust, and hopefully give some of you the vocabulary to better understand yourselves or loved ones who might be suffering silently. Now, let's illuminate these hidden corners of mental health together. First up on our journey through the depression spectrum is seasonal affective disorder, delightfully, or perhaps not so delightfully, abbreviated as SAD. Isn't it just perfectly ironic that a depression acronym spells out exactly how it makes you feel? Mother Nature has quite the sense of humor. Seasonal depression is precisely what the name suggests, a form of depression that swoops in with certain seasons, like an unwelcome house guest who shows up every year at the same time, unpacks their emotional baggage all over your life, and refuses to leave for months. For the vast majority of people with SAD, this uninvited visit arrives as the autumn leaves begin to fall and lingers stubbornly until spring flowers emerge. Imagine your emotional well-being becoming inexplicably tethered to the weather forecast. The shorter the days grow, the heavier your psychological burden becomes. We're not just talking about feeling a bit bummed that beach season is over. We're talking about profound changes, overwhelming fatigue that sleep doesn't seem to touch, an almost gravitational pull toward your bed that makes even simple tasks feel like scaling Mount Everest, insatiable cravings for carbohydrates and sugary foods as your body desperately seeks serotonin from any available source, a sensation of moving through emotional molasses where everything requires exponentially more effort, and a gradual withdrawal from the social connections that might otherwise sustain you through difficult times. The fascinating scientific story behind SAD revolves around our relationship with sunlight, that magical electromagnetic radiation that does so much more than help us see or give us sunburns. When natural light diminishes, our body's intricate biochemical clockwork goes haywire. The hypothalamus, essentially your brain's internal meteorologist, gets confused without adequate sunlight cues, leading to overproduction of melatonin, that delightful hormone that makes your eyelids heavy, and underproduction of serotonin, one of your brain's premier mood-elevating chemicals. It's like your brain chemistry is taking its cues from the darkening world outside, unfortunately in all the wrong ways. Interestingly, some people experience a complete opposite pattern. Their depression flares during the brightness and heat of spring and summer, receding only when autumn brings respite from the relentless sunshine. I vividly remember my colleague Jamie, who for years religiously proclaimed an intense hatred for winter, attributing her annual November to March personality change to just really hating the cold and dark. After a particularly difficult winter led her to therapy, she discovered she'd actually been battling textbook seasonal depression for nearly a decade. The introduction of light therapy into her daily routine, essentially basking in the glow of a special high-intensity lamp for about 30 minutes each morning, transformed her winter experience dramatically. Beyond light therapy, there are several evidence-based approaches that can help weather the seasonal storm. Making a conscious effort to spend time outdoors during precious daylight hours, yes, even when it's cold. Maintaining a consistent exercise routine that floods your system with endorphins. Consulting with your doctor about vitamin D supplementation. since many of us become deficient during low sunlight months, and proactively scheduling enjoyable winter activities to create points of genuine anticipation throughout the darker season. If you notice you consistently struggle during specific months every single year, pay attention to that pattern. It might not be a personality quirk or simple preference, but something your healthcare provider should know about. Now, let's shift our focus to a type of depression that arrives during what society constantly tells us should be one of life's most joyful chapters: postpartum depression, commonly abbreviated as PPD. Close your eyes for a moment and think about how new parenthood is portrayed in media. Serene mothers gazing adoringly at peacefully sleeping infants. Fathers confidently cradling newborns with tears of joy glistening in their eyes. Immaculate nurseries bathed in gentle sunlight and an overwhelming sense of fulfillment that seemingly makes all the sleepless nights and lifestyle adjustments worthwhile. It's a beautiful narrative, but for approximately 1 in 7 new mothers and a significant number of fathers and non-birthing parents as well, the reality includes a devastating emotional experience that feels impossible to reconcile with those picture-perfect expectations. Postpartum depression extends far beyond the temporary baby blues that affect up to 80% of birthing parents in the initial 2 weeks postpartum. While baby blues typically manifest as mood fluctuations, unexpected tearfulness, and feeling overwhelmed but generally resolve on their own relatively quickly, PPD sinks its claws much deeper and refuses to release its grip without intervention. The symptoms create a particularly cruel constellation of suffering: profound sadness or emptiness that feels bottomless, social withdrawal precisely when support is most needed, a terrifying emotional disconnection from the baby you intellectually know you should be bonding with, intrusive thoughts about potential harm coming to your baby, which causes immense distress even though you have no desire to act on these thoughts, dark contemplations of self-harm or escape, and a pervasive sense of inadequacy or failure in your new parental role. What makes postpartum depression especially insidious is the thick blanket of shame that often smothers any attempt to seek help. Our culture has constructed this powerful mythology that bringing a child into your family should automatically trigger overwhelming joy and fulfillment, as though centuries of evolutionary biology and hormonal adaptations should instantly override any other emotional response. This creates an impossible standard where parents experiencing depression feel fundamentally flawed, believing they're somehow failing at the most natural human experience. I cannot emphasize this enough. Postpartum depression is not a character defect, moral failing, or indication of parental inadequacy. It's a legitimate medical condition precipitated by the perfect storm of dramatic hormonal fluctuations, extreme physical recovery demands, profound identity transformation, severe sleep deprivation, and the monumental pressure being suddenly responsible for a completely dependent human life. The silver lining in this challenging cloud is that with proper support, PPD is highly treatable. A combination approach often works best. Therapeutic intervention to process emotional experiences, medication when appropriate to stabilize brain chemistry, connection with others experiencing similar struggles through support groups, and, perhaps most critically, practical assistance with infant care to allow for recovery time. For anyone supporting a new parent, please understand that vague offers like, "Let me know if you need anything," rarely translate to actual help. Instead, try specific gestures. "I'm bringing dinner Thursday." "I'll watch the baby for 2 hours while you take an uninterrupted nap," or simply checking in with direct questions about their emotional well-being rather than focusing exclusively on the baby. And remember, fathers and non-birthing parents can experience postpartum depression too, even though their hormonal landscape differs. Their emotional needs deserve equal attention and validation. Let's now explore a particularly sneaky form of depression that masterfully disguises itself as personality: persistent depressive disorder, formerly known as dysthymia. Unlike major depressive episodes that announce themselves with debilitating intensity, PD operates more like an emotional vampire, quietly draining your life's vibrancy while leaving you functional enough that neither you nor others might recognize the profound energy theft occurring. Imagine carrying an invisible backpack filled with rocks everywhere you go. You can still move through life, attend work, maintain relationships, even laugh at jokes and enjoy a moment occasionally, but everything requires substantially more effort than it should. The weight never disappears. You simply adapt to constantly compensating for it until exhaustion becomes your baseline. What definitively separates PDD from other depressive disorders is its remarkable persistence through time. While major depression typically involves discrete episodes lasting weeks or months between periods of recovery, persistent depressive disorder settles in for the long haul, a minimum of 2 years for clinical diagnosis, but frequently stretching across decades of a person's life. The chronicity becomes so embedded in someone's experience that many individuals with PDD develop the profound belief that constant heaviness is simply their natural temperament or an inevitable aspect of human existence. This is just how life feels, they conclude, having no frame of reference for anything different. The symptom profile of PDD creates a particularly challenging constellation to recognize, a persistent undercurrent of sadness or emptiness that never fully lifts, chronic fatigue that vacation doesn't cure, deeply rooted negative self-perception that feels like objective truth rather than distorted thinking, difficulty focusing or making even simple decisions, a pervasive sense that nothing will improve regardless of circumstances, and subtle but significant changes to appetite and sleep that become normalized over time. The extraordinary challenge with identifying persistent depressive disorder lies in its remarkable camouflage abilities. Because it doesn't typically feature dramatic breakdowns or obvious functional impairment, people adapt around it, developing compensatory mechanisms that allow them to meet obligations while suffering internally. I'll never forget interviewing a remarkable woman in her 50s who received her PDD diagnosis after nearly 40 years of believing she was simply a naturally somber person. She described the experience of starting appropriate treatment as discovering that everyone else had been seeing the world in vibrant technicolor, while I'd been watching a grayscale version of the same reality my entire adult life. She had no conception that constant emotional heaviness wasn't universal, that other people weren't expending massive energy just to accomplish ordinary tasks. If you spent years feeling persistently off or operating below your potential without obvious explanation, if you can't remember a time when life felt consistently light or joyful, consider asking a mental health professional specifically about PDD. Treatment approaches typically combine cognitive behavioral therapy to address entrenched thought patterns, sometimes appropriate medication, and lifestyle modifications designed to incrementally improve your neurochemical environment. Let's now illuminate a frequently misunderstood form of depression with a name that ironically contributes to its confusion: atypical depression. Despite its name suggesting rarity, this variant is actually quite common, affecting millions worldwide. The atypical label stems from how its symptom profile diverges from what was historically considered the depression prototype when psychiatric classifications were being established decades ago. The hallmark characteristic that distinguishes atypical depression, and often leads both individuals and clinicians to miss it, is what researchers call mood reactivity. Unlike melancholic depression, where emotional numbness persists regardless of circumstances, people with atypical depression experience temporary mood elevation in response to positive events or pleasant interactions. You might genuinely enjoy a friend's company during dinner, laugh heartily at a comedy show, or feel momentary excitement about good news, only to have your mood plummet again once the positive stimulus ends. This fluctuation creates tremendous confusion, leading many sufferers to question their own experience. How can I be depressed if I enjoyed myself yesterday? What makes atypical depression particularly distinctive is its unusual constellation of physical and emotional symptoms that almost seem contradictory to classic depression. Increased appetite often focused specifically on carbohydrate-rich or comfort foods, rather than the decreased appetite commonly associated with depression. Hypersomnia, where you might sleep 10+ hours, yet still feel unrefreshed, instead of the insomnia often seen in other forms, a peculiar leaden paralysis sensation, where your limbs feel physically heavier as though gravity has intensified specifically for you, heightened rejection sensitivity that makes even minor criticisms or perceived slights feel devastatingly painful, and relationship difficulties stemming from this emotional raw nerve being repeatedly triggered in normal social interactions. I find atypical depression particularly fascinating because it so brilliantly demonstrates how mental health conditions exist on complex spectrums rather than in binary states. The temporary ability to experience positive emotions doesn't invalidate the underlying depression. In fact, the contrast between those fleeting good moments and the return of heaviness can sometimes make the condition even more painful and confusing. This pattern frequently leads to profound self-doubt, with sufferers questioning whether they're really depressed or somehow fabricating their symptoms because they don't match the stereotypical always sad presentation popularized in media. Friends and family unintentionally reinforce this doubt with well-intentioned but harmful observations like, "You seemed fine at the party last weekend, so you must be doing better." If you recognize this pattern in yourself, where you can genuinely enjoy positive events in the moment while still carrying a persistent underlying heaviness that quickly returns, consider discussing atypical depression specifically with a healthcare provider. Research indicates this variant often responds particularly well to certain classes of antidepressants, especially MAOIs and SSRIs, and specific therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy that address the rejection sensitivity component. We've journeyed together through 4 distinct expressions of depression today: the seasonally triggered sad that waxes and wanes with changing light patterns, the postpartum variant that transforms what should be joyful new beginnings into devastating emotional struggles, the persistent dysthymia that camouflages itself as personality across years or decades, and the reactive atypical depression that confuses with its mood fluctuations. And yet, we've only scratched the surface of depression's many manifestations. There's premenstrual dysphoric disorder, PMDD, which creates cyclical depression synchronized with hormonal fluctuations, situational depression triggered by specific life events or transitions, treatment-resistant depression that stubbornly persists despite multiple intervention attempts, and numerous other variations that mental health professionals encounter regularly. The purpose of identifying these distinctions isn't to create rigid categories that box people in. Mental health exists along intricate, overlapping continuums, and many individuals experience elements from multiple depression types simultaneously or at different life stages. These classifications serve primarily as roadmaps for understanding patterns and identifying potentially effective treatment approaches. But your individual experience remains uniquely yours, potentially incorporating elements from various categories in ways that defy simple classification. Through all this complexity, I want to emphasize 4 fundamental truths that apply universally across depression's diverse landscape. First, you are never alone in your experience. Depression in its myriad forms affects hundreds of millions worldwide, creating an invisible community of understanding that spans cultures, ages, and backgrounds. Second, your depression is not a personal failure, moral weakness, or character flaw. It emerges from the complex interplay of biological predispositions, neurochemical processes, psychological frameworks, and environmental circumstances, none of which you consciously chose. Third, effective treatments exist for every manifestation of depression. Different approaches may work better for different types, but persistent exploration with qualified professionals can identify the combination that works for your specific experience. And finally, perhaps most importantly, depression may be part of your story, but it isn't your entire identity. It doesn't define your worth, limit your potential, or determine your future. If anything we've discussed today resonates with your personal experience, I strongly encourage you to reach out for professional support. Start with whatever feels most accessible. Your primary care physician can be an excellent first point of contact. Telehealth therapy options have made counseling more convenient than ever before, and national mental health helplines provide immediate support during difficult moments. Remember that finding the right help sometimes requires persistence. If the first professional you speak with doesn't feel like the right fit, that doesn't mean therapy won't work for you. It simply means you haven't found your therapeutic match yet. And please understand that recovery rarely follows a straight line. There will likely be setbacks interspersed with progress, but each step forward, no matter how small, represents genuine achievement worth celebrating. Depression tries to convince us that nothing will help and nothing will change, but that hopelessness is actually a symptom of the condition itself, not an accurate reflection of reality. With appropriate support and treatment, the overwhelming majority of people with depression experience significant improvement in their quality of life and emotional well-being. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending this time exploring these important mental health concepts with me today. My sincere hope is that this discussion has illuminated some previously shadowy corners of depression, perhaps helping you better understand your own experiences or enable you to offer more informed support to someone you care about who's struggling. If you found value in today's exploration, please consider hitting that like button. It genuinely helps the algorithm connect this content with others who might benefit from this information. And if you're interested in continuing these honest, nuanced conversations about mental health topics that affect so many of us, I'd be absolutely thrilled if you subscribe to my channel at Zakaprat. New videos drop every week covering everything from anxiety and depression to relationships, self-care practices, and strategies for navigating our complex emotional landscapes. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. What resonated with you? What questions do you still have? What mental health topics would you like me to address in future videos? Remember that prioritizing your mental well-being isn't self-indulgent or optional. It's an essential component of living a full, meaningful life, every bit as important as taking care of your physical health. Until our next conversation, please be extraordinarily gentle with yourself. You're doing the best you can with the resources you currently have, and that's more than enough. I'm Zaki, sending warmth and understanding your way. Take care, beautiful humans.